Aegir was the greatest of the sea giants. His wife was Ran. All who drown at sea are gathered into her net, and their 9 daughters are the waves of the sea. One day, all the gods arrived at Aegir's huge hall at the edge of the sea. Aegir did not wish to feed all the gods, nor did he wish to fight them. So he looked Thor in the eye and said, "I will make a banquet. As much food as your bellies can hold, as much ale as you can drink, and it will be the finest feast that any of you will ever attend. I have only one condition. You must bring me a cauldron big enough to brew ale for you all." Aegir knew that the gods had no such cauldron, and so did Thor. Thor asked all the other gods, and each of them said no such cauldron exists, until he asked Tyr, the god of battle and war. Tyr raised his left hand, his only hand, as his right hand had been devoured by Fenris Wolf many years ago, and told Thor his stepfather is the giant king Ymir, who lives on the edge of the world sea and has a cauldron that is 3 miles deep. Tyr and Thor then climbed into Thor's chariot, pulled by his goats, Snarler and Grinder. This was after Grinder had his leg bone broken for marrow from a trick by Loki, and they traveled to Ymir's fortress. Thor was known to the giants of the waste as their greatest enemy, and Ymir himself had vowed to slay Thor if ever he encountered him. So Tyr introduced Thor to his mother and stepfather Ymir as Vior. Tyr and Thor, pretending to be Vior, were invited as guests for dinner, where Ymir brought out 2 of his most favored oxen, boasting how enormously proud he was of his herd, that they were his treasures that delight his eyes, and that he treats them as his own children. Much to the shock of everyone, Thor immediately devoured both oxen all by himself, with a satisfying belch. Ymir, the giant king, said he had never seen a giant eat 2 oxen, food that was meant to last them all several days. Thor apologized and suggested he and the giant king go fishing the next day. Ymir also prided himself to be a great fisherman, and he agreed. Thor also boasted of his fishing skills, although he had never been fishing before, and thought how hard could it really be. Tyr whispered to him, "I hope you know what you are doing." "Of course I do," said Thor. But he didn't. Thor was just doing what he did best, which was whatever he felt like doing. Ymir boasted to Thor that he rows farther out into the cold and stays out longer than anyone else could survive, and that Thor would probably die. He then told Thor to go to the oxen field and look for whatever he can find to use as bait. Ymir then rowed them far out to sea where no land could be seen, but Thor scoffed and said, "Here? We've hardly gone out to sea at all." And he picked up the oars and rowed them swiftly into deeper waters. Ymir shouted for Thor to stop, that these waters were dangerous, for this is where Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent, was to be found. Ymir took out 2 large fish he used for bait, and promptly hauled up 2 of the hugest whales that Thor had ever seen, and Ymir grinned with pride. "Not bad," said Thor. And he pulled out his own bait that he took from the field of the oxen. Ymir's face froze when he saw what Thor was using as bait. It was the head of Ymir's most favorite prized ox. "I got bait from the ox field, like you said," Thor said to Ymir as he set the ox's head onto the hook and dropped it into the ocean. "I suppose fishing must be all about learning patience. It's a bit dull, isn't it? I wonder what I'm going to catch for our dinner." The sea erupted. Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent, had bitten down on the huge ox head and become hooked on Thor's line. Ymir shouted and screamed for Thor to let go of the line, but Thor held on, and the thunder god slammed his feet through the bottom of the boat, using the sea bottom to brace himself as the serpent spat black poison, and Ymir kept shouting in dreaded fear. The god of thunder fixed his eyes on his enemy and whispered, "I will kill you, or you will kill me. This I swear." Ymir kept screaming and shouting about how they were going to die, but Thor was focused and did not hear him or care. The Midgard serpent's head was almost within striking distance. He gripped his hammer Mjolnir. He knew just where the hammer needed to strike to kill the serpent. One more heave, and Ymir's bait knife flashed. The line was cut. Jormungandr reared up high and tumbled back into the sea. Thor threw his hammer, but the serpent was already gone. Ymir desperately bailed water from the boat, while Thor rowed the boat to shore. But they were still many miles from the exhausted Ymir's fortress. So Thor picked up the broken boat, the oars, Ymir's 2 whales, and Ymir himself on his back, and carried them all the way back to Ymir's hall. When they arrived, Thor set down the boat and said, "There, I brought you home as you requested. Now, I need a favor from you in return. I want to borrow your huge cauldron." Ymir said, "You are a mighty fisherman, and you row hard, but you are asking for the finest brewing kettle in existence. It magically brews the best of all beers. I will only lend it to someone who can break the cup I drink from." They returned to the hall, and at dinner Ymir drained the last of the beer from his drinking cup and called for silence, handing the cup to Thor and said, "Smash this cup, and the cauldron in which I brew my beer is yours as my gift to you. Fail, and you die." Thor nodded and threw the cup with all his might, and it crashed through one granite pillar, through a second, and landed in the rubble of a third. And Ymir went and retrieved the still unbroken cup. All the giants cheered and laughed, and Ymir said, "Here, wife, pour more beer for your son and his friend Vior. Let them taste the best beer there is, and be sad they will not be taking my cauldron home, and that they will never again taste beer this good. Also, they will be sad that I need to kill Vior now, for my cup is unbroken." As Tyr's mother filled Thor's cup with beer, she whispered, "You know, my husband has a very hard head. He's stubborn and thick-skulled. He has a very hard head, hard enough to break even the toughest of cups." Thor drained his beer and walked to Ymir and asked if he could try again. "Of course you can," shouted Ymir, and he handed Thor his cup. Thor hefted the cup once, twice, then turned and smashed the cup down on Ymir's forehead as the pieces fell onto Ymir's lap. Ymir cried and said, "If you want it, then take it. It's huge and heavy and takes over a dozen giants to lift it." Thor shrugged, grasped the cauldron by the rim, flipped it so he was inside it, and he headed out the door from within the cauldron and called out, "Thank you for the cauldron." Ymir stopped weeping, and all the giants stared open-mouthed. Thor and Tyr left the fortress and climbed into Thor's chariot with the cauldron and ran as fast as they could. Snarler ran well and fast, but Grindr limped and staggered, and Thor cursed Loki for his tricks. Tyr looked behind them and said, "They are coming, the giants are coming, go faster." Ymir was urging on all the giants of that part of the world, a many-headed monstrous bunch, the giants of the waste, misshapen and deadly, an army of giants, all intent on getting their cauldron back. Grindr stumbled and fell, and they were thrown from the chariot. Thor staggered to his feet and began to laugh. "What are you laughing about?" asked Tyr. "There are hundreds of them." Thor gripped Mjolnir, his hammer, and said, "I didn't catch and kill the serpent, not this time. But 100 giants almost makes up for it." And one after another, Thor killed the giants of the waste, until the earth ran black and red with their blood. Tyr fought one-handed and bravely and slew his share of giants that day. Tyr was relieved that Ymir was not among the slain giants, for he did not wish to cause his mother any more distress. Thor helped his injured goat Grindr to its feet, cursing Loki once more, and they returned to Asgard. The gods returned to Aegir with the cauldron, and the sea giant sighed and said, "It is indeed what I asked for. Very well, there will be an autumn feast for all the gods in my hall." Aegir was as good as his word, and since then, every autumn, once the harvest is in, the gods drink the finest ale there ever was or will be, in the Hall of the Sea Giant.